Age spread, we did pretty well getting a nice spread across the age groups. And we had a little bit more women than the general riding population, 22% women, 78% men. So the analysis we've started are listed here. So this is, I have this onion here. It really takes a lot of time to go through this data. So it's good to kind of go at it in layers, whatever metaphor you want to use, parfait, onion. So people often want to deep dive right off in some particular thing that is of interest, but it's probably better to go after it, kind of understand the meta information, how much mileage is there, the exposure numbers before going after. Sometimes that will reveal things that you want to put some resources into that you might not have even anticipated. This is kind of a neat example from the data. So we did a median split just to parse out frequent from infrequent riders. If you look at the numbers, the median for the frequent riders was just under 150 riding days per year. And for the infrequent, it was down something, it's probably on the next, well, it's down like say 15 days per year, 20 days per year. Big differences in the data set. You got some real high mileage riders and some low mileage, but if you look at it like this, I think it's even more interesting. So each of these black dots is a day out of 365 days that a person rode. And so what I see here, I sorted it so at the bottom, and this is not all the data, I did this before we were done. Down at the bottom where you have a person with lots of black dots, that's a really proficient, really regular rider. Sometimes you have people that will go for stretches and a whole lot of riding, but they'll have gaps in their riding. And then up at the top, imagine the differences between this rider who rode like 15 times in the whole year versus this rider down here who rode like 310 times. So there's big differences, and that's something that I wouldn't have called out prior to doing this. So I just mentioned that. We've started looking at decelerations. This one's real interesting to me. So if you look at decelerations, the first cut we've done is to call out the 95th percentile. So not crazy extreme braking, but a high frequency, high G situation. And for decelerations, we're seeing, and we did it per rider, so each rider is 95th. So that 15-day rider probably has a different 95th percentile decel. 0.3 Gs to 0.36 Gs on a motorcycle. People familiar with this car data, this would be much higher for car data. And then if you look at the accelerations, 0.38 to 0.5 G, so the accelerations are actually bigger than the decelerations. It snowed recently in Blacksburg pretty heavily, and I was thinking about this data. Kind of reminds me of that. It's not enough that you can drive, you have to be able to stop too. It reminds me of driving on snow. Maybe people are able to go, but can they stop to match? A little bit about the gear. We published a paper before we were done in Orlando about what people wear, and even the real conservative riders don't always ride with their full gear. We've mapped the data to weather around the country. Riding, most of the rides are between 10 degrees Celsius and 32 degrees Celsius, regardless of whether it's in Arizona or Virginia. So the flip side of that is an extreme ride in the States would be below 10 degrees or above. So this came up yesterday. Some of the differences between cars and motorcycles. Overall annual miles is low, so the proficiency is probably lower. There's gaps in riding that you tend not to see gaps so much in car driving. Of course, we know there's fewer bikes on the road, lower conspicuity, no crumple zone. It's an unstable system. I brought that up yesterday. Many of the bikes have high performance, high acceleration capabilities, but it comes down to the rider to be able to get it to stay vertical and stop. And they frequently have a different mission. Lots of people do ride for leisure, where some people ride or drive cars for leisure, but it's much less common. Another thing that's coming up is I sort of introduced this in the statistics. there's all these non-collisions, and in working through the video, we're having to kind of revisit how we define a crash, because in cars, a collision usually is a car hitting something, and for a bike, there's all these cases of the bike going down without impacting another vehicle. I'll just mention in the NHTSA study quickly so I can get to questions. We're doing 60 bikes with that same system and 100 bikes with this smaller, what we call the mini DAS, 2 cameras, and many of the other same measures. So in summary, naturalistic data can do quite a bit. Being able to capture exposure for each participant really makes it strong. It can reveal new causes of things, so it's a fairly new method, so some things will come out that weren't anticipated. We talked yesterday about using it to estimate where to put resources, and I think it does do a good job. If you get a good spread, like I showed you that age distribution, you'll kind of cover the problem space and then maybe weight it according to the statistics in your area. Are motorcyclists unique? There definitely are issues unique to motorcycles, and again, this is getting into my sort of speculation somewhat, or these aren't conclusions, these are just statements coming from me. I think, and these need to be considered in ITS. Whether riders are different from car drivers, yes and no, it just depends on the question you're asking. And here's where I really will stir it up. So there's a wide range of proficiency. I think I showed that with the range of riding frequency. I think very few people are proficient at last second braking. The fact is we're just not all pro athletes, right? So I think that can guide some design. Very few people want to get hurt, so that's helpful as a bounding box also. And so I think, I mentioned this yesterday, I think we can spend a lot of time trying to talk about, well, this brand motorcycle rider behaves this way, and I think it's more useful just to kind of broad strokes it and say, we all have trouble, and let's try and address those issues. And then in conclusion, I just want to thank everybody for putting this together and showing up. It's an excellent, well-organized, good group of people. I appreciate being here. Thanks for having me. Maybe 4 minutes for questions? I guess no. Yeah.
Those of us who are not engineers, can you try to explain a bit more in layman's terms the braking efficiency of the riders that you were talking about?
Oh, sure. So the units are Gs, and it's probably easiest just to compare. Think about it in cars. So out in urban streets, pulling up to a light that turns red, not even a surprise, you'd probably go 0.3 to 0.6 Gs, not uncommon. Car slows down in front of you, not uncommon, 0.3, 0.6 Gs. On the highway, just because it's infrequent, that same braking level would seem like a real extreme event. So on the highway, it's more like 0.2 Gs would be a fairly strong slow. On the highway, you rarely touch the brake, so it's going to be like 0.05 to 0.2 Gs, something like that. So these are, these look low. There's more to figure out. I mentioned this is early, but this it looks to me like they're probably lower than cars, and so you've got a bike operating with people. It's what they're familiar with. It's what they execute. It's what they have practice at, and it looks much lower to me than I would have expected.
I think it's very interesting what you say that the bikes, if I understood correctly, seem to brake with less power than the cars. But isn't it because the riders anticipate brakings more, so they don't have to brake as much because they've guessed or they read the road in advance? So don't
They
have to-
might. So you're saying that all 100 of our riders built a nice speed cushion and had lots of room to do gentle braking, maybe. And that might be, and we can figure it out, you know, with the radar. Totally, there's more to figure out here. This is just initial impressions. Might be that.
Hi. Just an observation from the side that please note in Europe, normally for taking the driving license, you have to brake, I think, in 70 kilometers an hour to pass the test.
Okay.
There's only 1 or 2 countries where they say you have to brake from 90. And we are allowed to go in all countries 110.
Mm.
I went to a training in the States and we were not allowed to brake that hard, so the ABS system went in. So I think this issue can also be related to what kind of training are we giving the riders. Just an observation.
Could be, yeah. Yep.
Yes, just a question about how do you detect the near misses of interesting events? Is it automatic? Do you use a video? How do you use that?
Right.
Question, and the second one, I would be very happy to have an idea of the price of the equipment per motorbike.
Right. On the first question, detecting near crashes, we still have to do that for motorcycles. We'll follow the same model we've done in cars and trucks, which is develop algorithms, usually come at it from multiple angles to try to avoid missing things, develop algorithms that will detect short following or short time to collision events through the radar, high decels through the accelerometers, multiple approaches like that. Then we watch them on video and separate the wheat from the chaff and then develop our rates like that. And then on the other question about the cost per bike, yeah, probably just for the hardware, something like for the 5 camera unit, let's say $1,500, but then labor to install, it's something in that ballpark. It takes a lot. It takes about 8 hours to install that big system on a bike. On the small system, we think we'll be able to do it in about 45 minutes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
In the price that you said, is it included also the data logger?
I should mention we don't sell the unit, so the price is.
That's produced by you.
Yeah, we designed it and built it, and this always is a question. We're researchers. We aren't software developers and software support people, and we've not tried to take that on. So we just use the system.